Hello all, and welcome to this overview and review of Hammerting. Hammerting appears to be this marvel of a subterranean city builder from the title screen, but what really is it? And why is it so unknown? Follow me and listen through this journey of this unique game. One thing you may be curious about is why I questioned the identity of the game, yet called it unique. It's a 2.5D colony management sim on a rectangular grid, more about rough management than directed orders. It's possible that it may make you think of Oxygen Not Included, and whilst they're both 2.5D, the systems are so fundamentally different. After choosing the name of your settlement within the mountain home, the name of the mountain itself, which is also the game seed, and some other settings, you load in to see the great entrance and your 3 starting dwarves making their way inside. You get some basic resources, and your first goals are to explore and to get down a small quarry for building materials. You should also set the preferred professions for your dwarves. Not all jobs can be done by the same person, and you definitely want a specified explorer. Your dwarves are unique, being part of different clans and having different traits. Perhaps you want to mine out some resources, build a stairwell, grow crops. You need the job and perhaps a building to fit, but priorities are not always the same at the start. Mountain Home is different with every mountain and creates a unique experience every time, along with unique challenges. The world of Hammerting is fairly unlike other fantasy worlds, and yet has a profound atmosphere that can only be compared to the concept of the Mines of Moria. Set in the time of the 6th Eon, the dwarves strike out into the mountain home of old once more, hoping to bring forth to the world a hold that stays for good, and either fulfills the myth of the Horde or secretly controls the world above. But the overworld has other problems. The lands are divided and tensions are growing. Trade might be easy for now, but dwarves can only guess at what is to come, and so they do what they do best: mine, craft, trade, and live out their lives in service of the mountain home, destroying monstrous lairs, mapping the mountain, and calling Hammertings to discuss important matters, set the course of the hold, and eventually the wider world. Music is not something I talked about much in my review of Northgard, but it's something I want to talk about here. Combined with the semi-realistic graphics, cool colours, and overall eerie nature of the once occupied and soon to be occupied mountain home, the music hits perfectly. It feels like it's telling the tales of great sorrow that once befell the dwarves that were here before, and yet also describes the caverns themselves alongside their very nature. It also tells of possible lost glory to be discovered, and that it can be made a home despite everything. The music makes sure not to get in your face, but will be more subtle, singing the song of dwarves and earth as you delve deeper and deeper. Dwarves. Your dwarves are your everything. Make sure to it that they are fed, their thirst slaked, greed tempered, and wounds tended to. They work to master their professions. This drives your core gameplay loop, satisfying their hunger and morale needs better, trading for coin to make sure they never run out, and researching towards what you need. You cannot tend to wounds besides purchasing bandages from the overworld until you research medicine. How do you research? Using mountain lore and trade lore. Sometimes knowledge takes one of the lore, or both. You gain trade lore by trading with the overworld and completing missions for the factions, alongside being given more vision of the overworld, as you cannot see all of it initially, just one place to trade to start. You gain mountain lore by delving further into the mountain home. How do you trade well? by selling resources and crafts made from those resources to the overworld. The resources? Deeper in the mountain home, and there are many of them. Copper and coal are your most basic resources, copper being a jack of all trades, and coal being your standard fuel for light and buildings. The game heavily encourages you to delve further and deeper for better resources, whilst giving many things to explore, find and exploit. But it's not exactly the easiest for your dwarves to do in their starting equipment, so you need to improve their equipment. A foundry smelts raw resources into bars, and a smithy will craft them into practical parts and then into tools. Getting better materials for better tools allows your dwarves to hit harder, craft faster, grow better, all whilst they gain buffs from experience points, assigned paths to be taken in by you. But they can only carry 3 tools, and usually one slot is reserved for a weapon to destroy the enemy with. They can also wear 2 rings, and a set of clothing or armour to improve their craft and ability to tank damage. Dwarves are damage sponges, but that doesn't mean you should underestimate the enemies that lurk within the mountain hold, and should prepare accordingly. The overworld shouldn't be ignored either. If you wish to root for a particular faction or alliance, you may construct upgrades in their holdings. This can be simple production bonuses to make them sell more goods at cheaper rates, better defences and might growth, or better manpower growth. 300 manpower and might, the enemy can create an army to fight enemy armies and tear down fortifications piece by piece. A holding without fully repaired fortifications cannot produce goods, and once an empire has no more fortifications, any enemy army reaching their capital takes a tile from them, or a settlement if valid, becoming stronger. You can tip the balance in any faction's favour by buildings, but also by the wares you trade. Trading food usually gives manpower, trading construction materials usually gives fortification repair, and trading weapons gives might. Efficiency is a necessity in the mountain home, for a lack of it will make it grind to a halt, or worse, collapse entirely. Infrastructure is vital to the dwarves, and the game presents multiple solutions. The minecart and rail system in the game is by far the best for getting around quickly and shifting resources, but that doesn't mean it's the only way to get around. Building bridges and stairwells is significantly cheaper and better for shorter journeys, and walk bridges are special in allowing other things to pass behind them. Building chests and storage not only allows you to store tons of resources, but can also be placed strategically near where they're needed, with a RimWorld style accept and deny system, but it isn't without its faults. Too many chests and the game can start to lag. Too little storage and the game may start to lag from all the ground items. And make sure if you have storage that it does not accept gems and ore, but build a separate storage for it that denies such from inventories to only pick up those resources on the ground. Pumping water may very well be a good thing early on, being an easier source of drinking water, but you have to keep that priority high to make sure it functions. Drills are excellent, allowing you to automatically mine the resources you need, whilst also getting more out of resource nodes than you would with a mine command. But you have to mine out the resources where the drill will be placed in order to avoid a resource clogging up your intended production. Lantern posts and braziers provide light, not allowing monsters to spawn as long as the local beacon shines. The lantern posts are significantly more expensive than braziers, despite being available earlier. Dwarves hold the line until your dwarves arrive. If you have no capacity to light an area, and you know attacks will come, put a door on. It's cheap and will hold until reinforcements arrive. Traps can be useful to stunt the approach of enemy waves, but also for loot farms around spawning lairs or areas kept intentionally dark. Specialising workspace and living well is where the dwarves excel, building all sorts of buildings for different needs and crafts, taking an order list. Order lists are made by you to ensure that things are made, a certain amount of it is stored or crafted to be sold. Vaults are required to hold money. If you have too much over your vault capacity, a dwarf may very well take more than what they are due. Farms, cookhouses, breweries, etc. are all sources of food and drink, whether growing, fishing, or cooking and brewing them into something better. A dwarf can only be satisfied with poor meals and drink for so long. However, if no resources can be found for a building that a dwarf can work in based on their tools, or no general order to be completed with the mountain home, they will idle. If dwarves are idling without good reason, make sure that there is access to resources or find a way to get the necessary resources at almost any cost. Sometimes, however, with such a rare resource like platinum, the mountain home will run out and you will need to abandon your plans with that resource. Also be careful with your mining of areas. Stranding a dwarf can cause dire consequences. Dwarves can jump reasonably high, but only jump 2 blocks across and high, and if a block is missing from an otherwise flat wall, they cannot climb it. They are also somewhat limited in this regard, but the dwarves also have some other problems with their behaviour, unfortunately. Dwarves have clans which can affect how well they do with some of these workplaces and can negatively impact on other dwarves. Also, sometimes after doing something important, they bump into another dwarf and interact socially. This wouldn't be an issue if it didn't tend to happen at the most inopportune moments, like when a dwarf has fallen unconscious from an attack and needs reviving by either of the dwarves with healing skill. Their priorities can also be an issue in this regard. When something needs doing first, but they keep getting distracted halfway there by need for food or an opportunity to return to one of their other duties. When you cannot prioritize that duty, you can only prioritize buildings themselves, and can partially do the same for mining commands, although you can't see it. Combat and move commands are always top priority, thankfully. Hammerting is a very deep and atmospheric game, yet simple in its concept of its gameplay loop. It is not without its issues, however, with development having stopped a year ago and a recommendation to use the experimental public beta version. I do love this game despite its flaws, have 100%ed it and consider it a true gem in the rough, and I'm yet to find anything else that could ever replace it, and so I give it a score of 8.5 out of 10, a brilliant game that could have been even better.